The hospital room door burst open. Sungmin stumbled in, his expensive suit torn and bloodied, his knuckles bruised and bleeding. In his trembling hands he carried a simple ceramic bowl, steam still rising from the jjigae inside. His mother, Sungyun, lay motionless on the bed, her breathing shallow and labored, the machines around her beeping in steady rhythm. "Amma," he whispered, his voice cracking. The word felt foreign on his tongue after so many years of coldness. Behind him in the doorway stood Grace. Her dark skin glowed in the fluorescent lights, her graying hair pulled back in a simple bun. She was 60 now, her hands weathered from decades of work, her eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. For 27 years she had cooked for this family. For 27 years she had loved them in silence. Sungmin set the bowl down and collapsed to his knees beside the bed. "I'm sorry," he sobbed, gripping his mother's frail hand. "I'm so sorry I didn't see it. I didn't see what was right in front of me all these years." The scene dissolved into memory. A younger Sungmin, barely 15, his face twisted with rage, pushing away a bowl of food. "I won't eat anything she touches," he had screamed at his mother. Grace, standing in the corner of the kitchen, her hands clasped together, her eyes downcast, absorbing every word like a blow. Flash forward. Sungmin at 30, now a feared mafia boss, sitting alone in a massive penthouse, eating expensive takeout that tasted like ash in his mouth. His phone rang constantly with reports of violence, money, power. But the silence around him was deafening. Another flash. Grace, her back bent over Sungyun's hospital bed, spooning broth into the dying woman's mouth, whispering prayers in a mixture of Korean and her native language. Sungmin, watching from the hallway, finally seeing. Finally understanding. The image shifted to a massive funeral hall. Hundreds of people in black. Mafia underbosses, politicians, business moguls. And Sungmin, walking through the crowd, every eye on him as he approached the elderly black woman standing in the back corner. The gasps that erupted when he fell to his knees before her. The words that would change everything. "If you permit me, I would like to call you Amma." Grace's weathered hand reaching down to touch his scarred face. "You already are my son. You have been for a long time." The title appeared across the screen in bold letters, as the sound of a heartbeat monitor flatlined, then steady again like a second chance at life. If you're already hooked by what you've seen, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button right now. This story gets even more intense and you won't want to miss a single moment. Drop a comment and tell me what you think is going to happen next. Now let's go back to where it all began. 27 years earlier, the gates of the Kim estate opened to admit a small, weathered taxi. Grace stepped out onto the pristine driveway, her single suitcase gripped tightly in her hand. She wore her best dress, though it was old and the hem had been mended several times. She had crossed an ocean for this opportunity, left behind everything she knew in Ghana, followed a job listing that promised fair wages and a place to stay. The estate was magnificent. Traditional Korean architecture blended with modern additions, sprawling gardens that probably required a team of gardeners. Grace had never seen such wealth in person. Her heart hammered in her chest as she approached the main entrance. Sungyun herself answered the door. She was 45 then, recently widowed, her face elegant but carved with grief. She looked Grace up and down, and for a terrible moment, Grace thought she would be turned away. Instead, Sungyun bowed slightly. "You are Grace." "Yes, ma'am." "Thank you for this opportunity. Come in. We will discuss your duties." Inside, the house was even more impressive. Polished floors, expensive artwork, the scent of incense and old money. But there were also signs of neglect. Dust in corners. Flowers in vases long dead. The absence of a man's presence everywhere, like a wound that hadn't healed. The other staff members appeared as Sungyun led Grace through the house. A head housekeeper, Mrs. Park, who looked Grace up and down with undisguised contempt. Two younger maids who whispered to each other and giggled. A groundskeeper who simply stared. "This is Grace," Sungyun announced. "She will be taking over kitchen duties and assisting with household management. You will treat her with respect." Mrs. Park's lips pressed into a thin line. "Yes, ma'am. Of course." But the moment Sungyun left the room, Mrs. Park turned to Grace with ice in her eyes. "I don't know how you fooled the mistress, but this is a Korean household. We have standards. Don't think you can bring your foreign ways here." Grace said nothing. She had heard worse. She had survived worse. The real challenge arrived that evening. Sungmin came home just after sunset, and Grace heard him before she saw him. Loud music from a car stereo, the squeal of tires on the driveway, shouting. He burst through the front door with 3 other boys his age, all of them reeking of cigarette smoke and aggression. At 15, Sungmin was already tall, already carrying himself like someone who understood violence. His school uniform was disheveled, his knuckles bruised. There was a cut above his eyebrow that looked fresh. When he saw his mother waiting in the foyer, his expression hardened. "Where have you been?" Sungyun's voice was quiet but firm. "Out. Your teacher's called. You haven't attended classes in a week. So you will apologize to them tomorrow and return to your studies." Sungmin laughed, a harsh sound. "Father is dead. There's no one to impress anymore." The slap came so fast Grace didn't see it. The sound echoed through the foyer. Sungmin's friends backed away. He touched his reddening cheek, his eyes blazing. "Your father would be ashamed," Sungyun said, her voice shaking. "Get cleaned up. Dinner is in 1 hour." Sungmin's gaze swept the room and landed on Grace, standing near the kitchen entrance. "Who's that?" "The new help. Her name is Grace." He looked her up and down, his lip curling. "You hired a foreigner? To work in our house." "I hired someone qualified and willing to work hard. Now go upstairs." But Sungmin didn't move. He walked closer to Grace, deliberately invading her space. She could smell the cigarettes on his breath, see the challenge in his eyes. "Can she even speak Korean?" "Enough," Sungyun snapped. "Upstairs. Now." He left, but not before shooting Grace a look of pure contempt. His friends followed, their whispers and laughter trailing behind them. Grace returned to the kitchen on shaking legs. She had prepared her first meal for this household. Doenjang jjigae, traditional and simple, made exactly according to the recipe Sungyun had provided. She had triple-checked every ingredient, every measurement. But now, as she stirred the pot, she wondered if anything she made would be good enough. Mrs. Park appeared in the kitchen doorway. "The mistress and her son eat in the dining room at 7 o'clock sharp. Don't embarrass us with whatever food you people eat." "I made exactly what Mrs. Kim requested." "We'll see." At 7 o'clock, Grace carried the dishes to the dining room. Her hands shook slightly as she set the bowls on the table. Sungyun sat at the head, Sungmin across from her. He looked at the food like it was poison. "I'm not eating this." Sungyun's expression didn't change. "Yes, you are. She probably doesn't even know what real Korean food tastes like. This is probably full of weird spices and—" "Sungmin." The steel in Sungyun's voice could have cut glass. "You will eat what is prepared in this house or you will eat nothing at all. Those are your choices." Mother and son stared at each other across the table. Grace stood frozen near the wall, wanting to disappear. Finally, Sungmin grabbed his spoon and chopsticks. He took a bite of the jjigae, his face set in stubborn defiance. But something changed in his expression. Just for a moment. The food was good. Better than good. Grace had learned to cook Korean dishes from her previous employer, had studied and practiced until she could make them authentically. And she had a gift, an intuition for flavors and balance. Sungmin ate 3 bites, then set down his spoon. "I'm not hungry." He left the table. Sungyun sighed, looking suddenly much older than her years. She tasted the jjigae herself and looked up at Grace with surprise. "This is excellent." "Thank you, ma'am. My son is going through a difficult time. His father's death was very hard on him. Please don't take his rudeness personally." But Grace knew better. She had seen that look before. It wasn't just grief. It was hatred, pure and simple, directed at her for the sin of being different. The days turned into weeks. Grace cooked 3 meals a day, cleaned, managed supplies, and endured the constant low-level hostility from the other staff. Mrs. Park found fault with everything. The younger maids ignored her unless they needed something. Only Sungyun treated her with consistent respect and even kindness. Sungmin continued to come home late, often injured, always angry. Grace learned his patterns. When he had bruised knuckles, he'd been fighting. When he came home in expensive new clothes, he'd been with his gang friends. When he avoided his mother's eyes, he'd done something he knew was wrong. And every night, Grace cooked dinner. Every night, Sungmin sat at that table and ate her food, never once acknowledging that it was good, never once looking at her as anything more than an inconvenience. 3 months and everything changed. Sungmin came home just after midnight, and Grace heard the commotion from her small room off the kitchen. She emerged to find him collapsed in the foyer, blood pooling beneath him. His shirt was soaked with it and there was a knife wound in his side. Sungyun was screaming for someone to call an ambulance. Grace ran forward without thinking. "Let me see." She had been a nurse in Ghana before coming to Korea. Her hands moved automatically, pressing against the wound to slow the bleeding, checking his pulse. Sungmin's eyes were glazed with pain and shock. "Stay with me," Grace commanded in Korean. Look at me. Stay awake. He focused on her face. For the first time really looked at her. Not with contempt or indifference, but with the raw vulnerability of someone confronting their own mortality. The ambulance arrived. At the hospital, doctors stitched him up and kept him overnight. Gang fight, they said, though they didn't press for details. Sung-yoon sat by his bed all night and Grace stayed with her. The next day when they brought Sung-min home, Grace had made samjitang ginseng chicken soup, known for its healing properties. She left it outside his bedroom door with a note in careful Korean. For strength. She didn't expect thanks. Didn't expect anything. But that night she found the bowl outside his door again, completely empty, licked clean. No note. No words. But it was something. The years crawled forward. Sung-min grew from a troubled teenager into a dangerous young man. By 18 he had fully joined the local crime syndicate. By 20 he was rising through the ranks. By 23 he was leading his own crew. The whispers around the house changed from concern to fear. Even Mrs. Park stopped criticizing Grace directly, perhaps because Sung-min's reputation now cast a shadow over everything. But through it all Grace cooked. Every single day. Breakfast, lunch, dinner. Even when Sung-min didn't come home for days, she prepared his portion and saved it, reheating it when he finally appeared. Even when he brought gang members home and they treated her like furniture, she served them with dignity. And Sung-min ate. Never commented. Never praised. But he ate everything she made. Sung-yoon's health began to decline when Sung-min was 24. First it was fatigue. Then pain. Then the diagnosis, aggressive cancer already advanced. Grace became her full-time caretaker, helping her dress, managing her medications, holding her hair when the chemotherapy made her sick. One evening, as Grace helped Sung-yoon into bed, the older woman took her hand. I need to tell you something. Rest, ma'am. You need your strength. No. Listen. Sung-yoon's eyes were fierce despite her weakness. When I hired you, the agency warned me. They said hiring someone who looked like you would cause problems. That Korean society wasn't ready. That my friends would judge me. Grace waited, her heart heavy. Do you know why I hired you anyway? Sung-yoon continued. Because when I interviewed you, you told me about losing your family. Your husband and daughter in that accident. How you'd crossed an ocean alone because staying in the place where they died would have killed you too. I saw in your eyes what I needed my son to see. What's that? That love isn't about where you're from or what you look like. It's about who stays. Who shows up every day. Who keeps trying even when it's hard. Sung-yoon coughed, a rattling sound. You've been family to me, Grace. More family than some who share our blood. I wish Sung-min could see that. He's young. He's angry. He's blind. Sung-yoon's grip tightened. Promise me something. Promise that you won't give up on him. Even if he never sees it. Even if he never changes. Promise me you'll keep loving him the way mothers do. Because I won't be here much longer and he's going to need someone. Even if he doesn't know it. Grace's eyes filled with tears. I promise. That night, she cooked Sung-min's favorite dish, the doenjang jjigae with extra garlic that he always finished but never acknowledged. She left it on the dining room table with a note for when he came home. The note said simply, Your mother loves you very much. Make sure you're subscribed because what happens next will absolutely shock you. This story is about to take a turn that changes everything. Hit that like button if you're feeling this story so far, and drop a comment telling me about a time someone showed you love in an unexpected way. Now let's continue. Sung-min came home at 2 in the morning. He read the note. He ate the jjigae cold, standing in the dark kitchen. And for the first time in 9 years he sought out Grace. She was sleeping in the chair beside his mother's bed, keeping watch. He stood in the doorway just watching. Watching this woman who had endured his contempt and his silence and his cruelty, now holding his mother's hand as she slept, dark skin against pale, 2 hands clasped together in the dim light. He turned and left without waking them. But something had cracked in the wall around his heart. The years continued their relentless march. Sung-yoon fought the cancer for 3 years. Grace never left her side. Sung-min, now a full-fledged crime boss with blood on his hands and power in his grasp, visited his mother every week, sometimes every day. The 3 of them would sit in Sung-yoon's room. Grace would bring food. They would eat in silence, the sound of chopsticks and breathing and machines the only soundtrack. Sung-min began to change in small ways. He started coming home earlier. Started asking Grace if she needed anything from the market. Started, once or twice, saying thank you so quietly it was almost inaudible. Grace noticed everything but said nothing, afraid that acknowledging it would make it stop. One day Sung-yoon called Sung-min to her bedside. She was barely conscious most days now, the cancer having spread everywhere. But her eyes were clear when he sat down. "Do you know why I hired Grace?" she whispered. Sung-min shook his head, throat tight. "Because when I interviewed her, she told me she understood loss. She'd lost her own family, crossed an ocean alone. I saw in her eyes what I needed you to see. That love isn't about where you're from. It's about who stays." She coughed and Sung-min held her hand tighter. "She's been family longer than some who share our blood. Promise me you'll see that. Mother. Promise me." But he couldn't. The words stuck in his throat, trapped behind 20 years of pride and prejudice and pain. Sung-yoon saw his struggle and squeezed his hand weakly. "You will," she said. "Someday you will." 2 months later, Sung-yoon Kim passed away peacefully in her sleep, with Grace holding one hand and Sung-min holding the other. The funeral was massive. Politicians, business leaders, and half of Seoul's underground showed up to pay respects. Sung-min, now 32, stood at the front, his face an unreadable mask. But inside he was falling apart. His mother had been his last connection to anything good in his life, and now she was gone. The estate felt empty. The money and power felt meaningless. He threw himself into work, into violence, into anything that would make him stop feeling. And through it all, Grace remained. She cooked meals he barely touched, cleaned rooms he barely used, maintained the house as if Sung-yoon would come back and expect everything perfect. Sung-min ignored her, same as always, but now the silence felt different. Heavier. Haunted. 1 year passed. Then 2. Sung-min's criminal empire grew. He was untouchable now, feared throughout Seoul. But he was also utterly alone. He moved into a penthouse downtown, leaving the estate to gather dust. He ate expensive meals that tasted like nothing. He surrounded himself with people who feared him and no one who loved him. Grace stayed at the estate, living in her small room, maintaining the house, cooking meals for no one. She was 58 now, her hair gone completely gray, her hands painful with arthritis. Mrs. Park and the other staff had long since left. It was just her and the memories. Every week, she still cooked Sung-min's favorite jjigae and put it in containers, even though he never came to collect them. She kept his room exactly as it had been. Kept hoping. Then came the night that changed everything. Sung-min's most trusted lieutenant, a man named Choi who had been with him for 10 years, staged a coup. He'd been selling information to a rival gang, had been planning this for months. The rival gang struck at the estate first, wanting to destroy Sung-min's family legacy, send a message written in fire. Grace was in the kitchen when she smelled smoke. She tried to get out but the flames spread too fast. She was trapped in her small room, smoke filling her lungs when she heard shouting. Men with guns. Men with fire. She pressed herself against the wall, praying prayers she'd learned as a child in Ghana. An explosion rocked the building. Part of the roof collapsed. Grace felt something heavy slam into her shoulder, felt searing pain, then nothing. She woke up in a hospital. Her left arm was in a cast. Her lungs burned. A nurse told her she'd been unconscious for 3 days. Told her she was lucky to be alive. Told her the estate had burned to the ground. "Where is Sung-min?" Grace croaked. The nurse didn't know. Grace tried to get up but pain lanced through her body. She lay back, tears streaming down her face. Not for herself. For him. For the boy she'd fed for 27 years, the man she'd loved from a distance, the son she'd never been allowed to claim. Across the city, Sung-min was orchestrating his revenge. He'd survived the coup barely. 3 of his men were dead. His headquarters were destroyed. But he was alive and absolutely feral with rage. He hunted Choi and the rival gang with single-minded brutality. It took him 4 days to find them all. On the 5th day, covered in other men's blood, he went to what remained of the estate. The fire department had cleared it. Nothing was left but charred walls and ash. He stood in what had been the foyer, where he'd first seen Grace 27 years ago, where his mother had slapped him for his disrespect. He walked to where the kitchen had been. Just ash and rubble. And there, partially buried, he saw it. A small, fire-damaged notebook. He pulled it free, opened it with trembling hands. Grace's handwriting filled the pages. Dates. Recipes. But also notes. March 3rd, Sung-min came home hurt today. Bruise on his face, won't say how. Made extra broth for healing. Left it outside his door. He needs strength even if he won't ask for it. June 15th, Madam very weak today. Sung-min visited. Saw worry in his eyes even though he hides it. Made his favorite jjigae. Hope it brings some comfort to them both. September 22nd, Sung-min's birthday. He doesn't celebrate anymore, not since his father died. Made mayak guk, traditional birthday soup. He ate it all. Didn't say thank you, but I saw him smile just a little when he thought no one was watching. My heart is full. Page after page. 27 years of entries. Every meal. Every worry. Every small moment of hope. A chronicle of love given freely, never acknowledged, never returned, but given anyway because that's what love does. Sungmin sank to his knees in the ash. The notebook fell from his hands. And for the first time since his father's death, he wept. Not quiet tears, but great, racking sobs that tore from his chest like they were ripping him apart from the inside. All those years. All those meals. All that love, and he'd never once said thank you. Never once treated her like she mattered. His mother's voice echoed in his mind. She's been family longer than some who share our blood. Promise me you'll see that. He finally saw it. Saw everything. And it broke him completely. He didn't know Grace had been in the fire. Didn't know she'd been hurt. He assumed she'd left years ago, that she'd finally given up on them. He spent the next 3 days in a drunken haze, the notebook clutched against his chest, unable to eat, unable to sleep, drowning in regret. It was one of his remaining men who finally told him. Boss, I found out where Grace is. She was in the fire. She's at Seoul General. Sungmin ran. He literally ran out of his penthouse, down the stairs because the elevator was too slow, into his car. He drove like a madman through the city, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might explode. She'd been hurt. She'd been in the fire because of him, because of his choices, his life, his enemies. If she died before he could tell her, before he could apologize, before he could finally acknowledge what she'd been to him. He burst into the hospital like a tornado. Found her room. And stopped in the doorway. She was asleep, her gray hair spread across the pillow, her arm in a cast, bandages on her neck and shoulder. There were burns on her hands. She looked so small in that hospital bed, so fragile. This woman who had been a constant in his life for 27 years, who had fed him and cared for him and loved him when he'd done nothing to deserve it. He approached the bed like he was approaching a sacred shrine. Sat down in the chair beside her. And waited. Grace woke to find him there. For a moment she thought she was dreaming. Then she saw the notebook in his hands, saw the tears on his face, and she knew. You read it? She whispered. Why? His voice was wrecked raw. Why did you stay? All those years. I was so cruel to you. I treated you like you were nothing. Why didn't you leave? Grace reached out with her good hand and touched his face. He flinched at first, then leaned into her touch like a man dying of thirst. Because your mother saw me when the world didn't. She gave me a chance when no one else would. And because I saw that angry boy and recognized him. I knew what broken felt like. I knew what it was to lose everything and not know how to live with the pain. I don't deserve. Love isn't about deserving, Grace said softly. It never was. Your mother taught me that. She loved you when you were angry and violent and pushing everyone away. I learned from her. That's what mothers do. We love because that's who we are, not because of who you are. Sungmin broke. He laid his head on her hospital bed and cried like a child. Grace ran her fingers through his hair, making soft shushing sounds, the way she'd wanted to do for 27 years but had never been allowed. I'm sorry, he sobbed. I'm so sorry. For everything. For all of it. I know, baby. I know. They stayed like that for a long time. The Korean Mafia boss, feared throughout Seoul, crying in the arms of the black woman who had cooked for him for 27 years. The woman he had finally learned to see. When he could speak again, he pulled back and looked at her. The estate is gone. Everything burned. I'll buy you a new house. Anywhere you want. You never have to work again. You never have to see me again if you don't want to. I'll give you anything. I want to cook for you, Grace said simply. That's all I've ever wanted. If you're not already subscribed, what are you waiting for? This channel tells stories that matter, stories that'll make you feel something real. Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. Drop a comment and tell me if you've ever realized too late how much someone meant to you. Now let's see how this incredible story ends. The funeral for Sung-yoon had been 2 years ago, proper and formal. But Sungmin arranged a second memorial service. This time it was smaller, more intimate. Just for family. He invited Grace as the guest of honor. When she arrived at the memorial hall, she found it filled with flowers and photos of Sung-yoon. But there were also new photos. Of her. Of her and Sung-yoon together. Of her cooking in the kitchen. Of her holding Sung-yoon's hand in those final days. Memories she didn't even know had been captured. Sungmin stood at the front, wearing traditional Korean mourning clothes. When he saw Grace, he walked to her and took her hands. Thank you for coming. Of course. I want to say something. In front of everyone. He led her to the front of the room. The few people there, some of Sung-yoon's old friends, some of Sung-min's legitimate business associates, watched with curiosity. Sung-min took a deep breath. My mother died 2 years ago. But I was so lost in my grief and my anger that I didn't honor her properly. I didn't honor the things she tried to teach me. The most important thing she tried to teach me. He turned to Grace. This woman Grace worked for my family for 27 years. She cooked for us, cared for us, loved us, and I treated her like she was invisible. I never once thanked her. Never once acknowledged what she meant to my mother. What she meant to me even though I was too blind to see it. His voice cracked. My mother told me before she died that Grace was family. That she'd been family longer than some who share our blood. I didn't understand then. But I understand now. He got down on his knees before Grace. The traditional Korean gesture of deepest respect, usually reserved for elders and honored ancestors. Gasps echoed through the room. Grace, you fed me when I was hungry. You healed me when I was hurt. You stayed when you had every reason to leave. My mother called you family and she was right. If you permit me, if you think I'm worthy after everything I've put you through, I would like to call you Amma. Mother. The room was dead silent. Grace looked down at this powerful man, kneeling before her, finally seeing her. Finally acknowledging the love she'd given so freely for so long. Tears streamed down her face. You already are my son, she said, her voice strong despite the tears. You've been for a long time. I've been waiting for you to realize it. She helped him to his feet and pulled him into an embrace. Sung-min held her tight, his face buried against her shoulder, and for the first time in his adult life, he felt like he was home. The gossip spread through Seoul like wildfire. The infamous Mafia Boss Sung-min had publicly claimed a black woman as his mother. Some people were scandalized. Some were confused. But Sung-min didn't care. He was done living for other people's approval, done pretending that blood was the only thing that made family. He bought Grace a house. Not too big, not too small, but with a kitchen that was perfect. Top-of-the-line appliances, plenty of counter space, windows that let in the morning sun. He visited every week for dinner. And slowly, painfully he began to change his life. He couldn't undo the violence of his past. Couldn't bring back the people he'd hurt. But he could stop creating new victims. He began transitioning his operations toward legitimate business. It would take years, maybe decades, but he was determined. His mother had wanted better for him. Grace deserved better from him. And Grace? She cooked. Every Sunday, Sung-min came for dinner. Sometimes he brought people. Former gang members trying to go straight. Business partners. Once, nervously, a girlfriend he wanted Grace to meet. Grace cooked for all of them, welcomed all of them, loved all of them the way she'd always loved. But her favorite nights were when it was just her and Sung-min. When she could teach him to cook, standing beside him in the kitchen, guiding his hands as he learned to make jjigae the way she'd made it for him for 27 years. Why did you never give up on me? He asked one evening as they stood side by side chopping vegetables. Grace smiled. Because I knew who you really were, underneath all that anger. I saw the boy who ate 3 bites of my jjigae that first night and tried so hard not to show that he liked it. I saw the young man who said thank you when he thought I was asleep. I saw the son who held his mother's hand when she was dying. That's who you really are, Sung-min. Everything else was just armor. He set down his knife and turned to her. I wasted so much time. No, she said firmly. You learned what you needed to learn when you were ready to learn it. That's not wasted. That's just being human. 6 months after the memorial service, Grace got sick. Just a cold at first, or so they thought. But at 62, with a lifetime of hard work behind her, her body didn't fight it off the way it should have. The cold became pneumonia. The pneumonia landed her in the hospital. Sung-min was there every single day. He brought her flowers. He read to her. And when she was strong enough to complain about the hospital food, he snuck in containers of homemade jjigae that he'd made himself, following her recipes exactly. How is it? He asked nervously as she took the first bite. Grace smiled. It's perfect. Tastes just like home. That's because you are home, Sung-min said, taking her hand. Wherever you are, that's home for me. Grace recovered, though it took weeks. When Sung-min finally brought her back to her house, he'd had it decorated with photos. Photos of her and Sung-yoon. Photos of her cooking. Photos of the two of them together, mother and son, finally acknowledged. On the kitchen wall, in a place of honor, hung her old recipe notebook. Sung-min had had it professionally restored, the fire damage repaired as much as possible, the pages preserved behind glass. Beside it, a new notebook, this one with both their handwriting in it. recipes they were creating together. A new legacy. What do you want for dinner tonight? Sungmin asked. Grace thought for a moment then smiled. Let's make doenjang jjigae. Together. The way I made it that first night. They cooked side by side the way they would for many years to come. Grace guided, Sungmin learned. They talked about everything and nothing. About Sungyoon, about the past, about the future Sungmin was building. About forgiveness and second chances and the kind of love that feeds you, body and soul. When the jjigae was ready, they sat down at the table together. Sungmin served Grace first, the way a good son should. Then he served himself. They ate in comfortable silence, the kind of silence that comes when words aren't necessary because everything important has already been said. Sungmin said, using the word that had once felt so foreign and now felt so right. Thank you. For everything. For never giving up. For showing me what real love looks like. Grace reached across the table and squeezed his hand. That's what mothers do, Sungmin. We love. We feed. We stay. And we never ever give up on our children. Outside, the sun was setting over Seoul, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Inside, in a small house with a perfect kitchen, a mother and son shared a meal. Not bound by blood but by something stronger. Bound by choice. By persistence. By the kind of love that shows up every day, even when it's not appreciated, even when it's not returned, because that's what love does. It stays. It feeds. It heals. And eventually, if you're very lucky, it teaches you to see what was there all along. The jjigae was perfect. Tasted exactly like home. Before you go, I need you to do 3 things for me. First, smash that subscribe button if this story touched your heart. Second, hit the like button and let me know in the comments what part of this story affected you the most. And third, share this video with someone who needs to hear this message about family, forgiveness, and the power of unconditional love. Stories like this remind us that family isn't always about blood. It's about who stays, who loves, and who never gives up on us. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.